Islam. The need for unity is so great that it is better to unite than to eat, sleep, drink, talk, or walk. This is the hour of deception. A house divided cannot stand. And for that cause, we're preparing ourselves to become one again with thy Father, God Allah. We must remember the mighty and great need for unity. We must remember the cause of our fall and why it is so hard for this age to comprehend the resurrection of the dead. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish prayer because this is the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. At this time, I'd like to recite the Moorish American prayer. And again, I would like to say, this is the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. First off, I'd like to rise, walking in Jerusalem, just like John, giving praise to Allah, the author, the creator, the governor of the world, almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible, the one who stretches forth the heaven with his hands, who have described with his fingers the courses of the stars, who set it bounds to the ocean that it cannot pass, and said to the stormy winds, be still. I'd like to give honor to all of those and honor to all of you that have, will aid and assist us in this, our divine and gigantic mission, the uplifting of fallen humanity. At this time, I'd like to read from the book of the seven seals that was divinely prepared by our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, for our earthly and our divine salvation. I would like to read from chapter 25. And chapter 25 reads on this wise. Divine ministry of Jesus. Jesus goes to the wilderness for self-examination, where he remains 40 days, is subjected to 3 temptations. He overcomes, returns to the camp of John, and begins teaching. I'm honored to be able to come to our Portland listening audience again to talk to you about the last prophet in these days and time, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, because he is the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America for the express and profound purpose of uplifting fallen humanity, teaches those things necessary to make our members better citizens. Praise Allah and honor to the prophet. I want to start this cast today by talking to you from the Surah 33, ayat 40, and Surah 49, verse 13. Now, Surah 33, ayat 40 says that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. I had to go into this because all week I've been dealing with this subject matter with a few other brothers and sisters. And I'm so honored because it gives me the opportunity to tell you what I know and not what I've been told. Then we have Surah 49. And Surah 49, verse 13, 11, and 12 talks to you and I about the prophet. It says, whenever a nation is in need for a prophet, Allah will send one. So when we talk about Surah 33, Ayat 40, and it said that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. So I'm going to give you some signs today. I'm going to talk to you about something that I've been looking at for the last couple of days because I wanted to come to the Moorish Voice television broadcast and give you this signs because you need it. And it started when it said that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. And they say after that, ain't no more gonna come. But I want to talk to you about God. Because in Surah 49, verse 13, it talks about Allah and the prophet. And it was talking about Surah 49, it said, whenever a nation is in need of a prophet, Allah will send one. And if Allah didn't send one to a people who need it, then something might be wrong with Allah. So let me get into this, because we got a lot to talk about when we're dealing with this, because this is what Noble Drew Ali brought us. Now, I remember when I began to study my lessons, and we looking at the lessons that the prophet gave us. I'm talking about Prophet Noble Drew Ali, because right now, when they say Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet, that means that after him, nobody else gonna come. But I remember a lesson that was given to us. And when it was given to us, it was given us, telling us that the Moors fought with the Ottoman Turks to restore the Islamic creed. Now this was, when was the head of Satan taken off? The head of Satan was taken off in 1453. Byzantine, by whom? By Muhammad. So let's talk about this, because you ain't never heard this before, because everything that you heard is dealing with Negro, is dealing with color, and is dealing with black. And the only black flag I know is the one that killed roaches. So let's look at this now. It says, Surah 33, Ayat 40, saying that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. And it also shows that when we were Muslims, we fought with the Ottoman Turks to restore the Islamic creed. Now what are we saying? We saying that the Moors fought with the Ottoman Turks, and at that time, we was not saying anything about Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet, because he was at that time. And I'm explaining this to you because things had changed. Now, when you begin to look at the record, it talks about the Moors. It says that the Moors went into Spain. And when the Moors went into Spain, we went into Spain and gave Europe civilization, meaning that we went into Spain and brought Europe out of the Dark Ages. Now this is kind of confusing. We saying that the Moors from Africa went into Spain, brought Europe out of the Dark Ages because they was doing things that was diametrically opposed to what God said. So we're talking now about 711, and we're talking about when the last stronghold of the Moors fell in Granada, Spain. 711 to 1492. So when we look at 1492, we know shortly thereafter, 1492 was the 15th century. And we know during the 15th century, something transpired that we still have no knowledge of. So what took place in the 15th century that we have no knowledge of is this. To be one of them is because the Moors went into Spain, and in the 15th century, the European nations took Jesus. And we're going to talk about Jesus a lot today because a lot of people don't want to talk about Jesus, because whenever you hear one talk about Jesus, the first thing you do is look at one thing as being another. But when we're talking about the 15th century, this is when the European nations took out Jesus, buried Jesus in Vatican Square. And when the European nations buried Jesus in Vatican Square, what did they do? They took on our name. They took on our name and they claimed to be Jesus. But why would a European people want to claim to be somebody that they're not? And this is what my subject matter is going to be about today. Now, let's go back some. Let's go back to the 2nd century. We want to go back to the 2nd century because you know that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, well, when was he born? He was born in 570 AD and passed from in 632. Now we're saying 570 AD, but if we go back, just say to the 2nd century, because we're going back even further than that. When we go back to the 2nd century, we're in Africa. And being that we're in Africa, everything in all the world, there's two things. You got Asiatic and you have European. You're one or you're the other. You're Asiatic or you're European. Now, there was a time when the whole world was called Asia. And at that time, Europe was not even in existence. Because we know that when you begin to talk about the human race, you're talking about the Asiatics. See, because Europe was not even exist, they took on this later. So when we're talking about the 2nd century, and we're looking at Hannibal, and we're looking at all these brothers and sisters that are from Africa in the 2nd century, we wasn't even in this book yet. This book right here was not even in existence yet. When you were talking about the Holy Quran of Mecca, the Holy Quran of Mecca was not even in existence in the 2nd century. So this is where we want to get into some understanding, because we just had our Moorish Christmas and our Moorish New Year. So in this, we're going to talk about the last prophet in these days and time, because we was in need of a prophet. And Allah sent noble Jew Ali. Why was we in need for a prophet? Because truth don't change. Man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So as I said earlier, we fought with the Ottoman Turks because the head of Satan was taken off, in 1453 Byzantine. And the head was taken in 1453 Byzantine, it's because that we was Muslims. And as us being Muslims, we have to fight to restore the Islamic creed. Now, we said that we went into Spain. We went into Spain in 711. Why did we go in Spain? Reiterate that. We went in Spain because Europe was in the Dark Ages. And we went into Spain because we wanted to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Because when you're in the Dark Age, that means you sleep. That means you're dead. That means you're untouchable in the sight of God, because you're not living a moral and clean life. And when you live in a moral and clean life, as this book says, you have to live according to the word of God. So this is where we're coming in now. We got to look at this again. We have to look at this because it said that Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. But whenever a nation is in need for a prophet, God will send one. So now, if Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophets, what do we need a prophet for? Well, we need a prophet is because in 1492, this is when our last stronghold fell in Granada, Spain. And when our last stronghold fell in Granada, Spain, then we come just like the European now. In 1492, when our last stronghold fell in Granada, Spain, because we went in there to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages and to let them know about the acts that was put upon them by the European nations, because we are going into another ether now. So we're talking about 1492. But we're talking about Surah 49, verse 13. And Surah 49, verse 13, telling us that whenever a nation is in need of a prophet, Allah will send one. So Allah had to send us. When we went into Spain, gave Europe civilization, and 1492 was our last stronghold, then this is why we had to call on the great God Allah, because we was no longer Moors. When the Europeans came into our location, they gave us another name. Partly of it is Negro, colored, and black. Noble Drew Ali said Negro is a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. He said colored. He said colored is anything that has been painted, stained, varnished, or dyed. And he said black. He said black, according to science, means death. Along with that, I was listening to this brother Sharif last night talking on one of his podcasts. And when he was talking on his podcast, he was talking about the 3/5 of a man, which is not us. And he was talking about the Moors. And he was talking about there are those who call themselves Negro, colored, and black. But it took me back to Ward Deen Muhammad. And Ward Deen Muhammad's father was Elijah Muhammad. And when Elijah passed, Ward Deen was in charge. Some people honored it for a while and then they stopped honoring it. So now we got to look, when you talk about Ward Deen and Ward Deen Muhammad telling us that when his father, Elijah, first taught them anything about the last prophet in these days and time, Noble Drew Ali, he said that his father had one of these fezzes on. And he said all of the brothers and the sisters that was in the Nation of Islam, everything that they had on, it was the gear. Let me reiterate that. He said everything that they had on was that his father had everybody on. It was a gear that they got from Noble Drew Ali. So that means that everybody that was with Noble Drew Ali is no longer with Noble Drew Ali. But there was a lot of people that was with Noble Drew Ali. But when those accepted Noble Drew Ali, the first thing you did, you had to change your name. Because we talking about Spain. We talking about the Moors going into Spain in 711 to give Europe civilization and to bring them out of the Dark Ages. But those people that was members of the Nation of Islam, along with Ward Deen Muhammad, they accepted the term of Asiatic black man. See? But we know black, according to science, means death. And when we went into Spain in 711, listen to this, because we keep talking about reparation. Can't nobody talk about reparation. The only people that could talk about the reparation is the Moorish Americans, who are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. So we're going to have to talk about reparation. But you can't sit at the table with me, when we talking about reparation because you claiming to be a black man. And this is the first time in the history of mankind. I was looking at my little granddaughter. And my little granddaughter is from Nigeria. Both of them. Their father is from Nigeria. And if both of them are from Nigeria, then how can their nationality be black? And when you begin to talk about those from Nigeria, we in West Africa. So this is what Noble Drew Ali from time memorial keep bringing to us, letting us know that man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So we got to look at Drew Ali again. And the reason why we want to look at Drew Ali again, because we have a book here. And this book right here, we have 101 questions. And in these questions, it says, will you give in brief the lines and order through which Jesus came? It says, some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham, Boaz by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary. Now let's look at this, because I be talking to a lot of brothers, especially when those who claim to be black men, those who want to be black men. But you who your forefathers were. Truth don't change. Who you were yesterday, that's who you are today. You say we went into Spain in 711 to give Europe civilization. How did things change? You was a Moor yesterday, but you're not a Moor today. You was who your forefathers and mothers were, but you are not that today. And this is why we're looking at our calendar today. It says January the 8th is Moorish Christmas. And this is because Noble Drew Ali gave us some instructions on that day. And he said our new year is January the 15th. You know, there's another January the 15th too. And the other January the 15th is the day Martin Luther King birthday. And we're talking about that because it's very important. The reason why I say that is because when we begin to talk about Noble Drew Ali, the Moorish Science Temple of America, the citizens of all free national government, because you know when Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, I remember that. I was in high school. And when they killed Martin Luther King, they killed him because he was telling us about something that we had no idea of. Because you got civil rights, you got human rights. And when you begin to look at Martin Luther King in 1968, he was telling us about civil rights, which is a non-political issue. Civil rights is not even an issue that you can take to the UN. That's just like right now, brothers and sisters talking about we're going to court. And we go to court, we go on the court to get reparation. But who is going to court to get reparation? Because you're who your forefathers were. And we know, just like today, you look all across the country. And when you look across the country, you will see brothers and sisters talking about they going to court. And you got Europeans who help you take them to court, because when they go to court, they say we dealing with a non-political, we dealing with an issue. They have to come before the court because we're talking about reparation. But if you call yourself black, if you call yourself Negro, if you call yourself colored, and you want a granted privilege, you cannot go to court. You cannot go to the European nation being a black man, a Negro, or a colored and say we coming here for reparation. I was talking to a sister today up at Case's Meat Market, and she brought her mother there because of the kind of work that they was doing. But her mother told her that you're not Negroes, you're not colored, and you're not black. He said these names was given to slaves by slaveholders. And when you do that, then that push you outside of the constitutional fold. And this is what makes Noble Drew Ali so special. Because the book say whenever a nation is in need of a prophet, Allah will send one. So he sent Drew Ali to redeem us from our sinful ways. And Drew Ali said it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that allude to slavery. And we're talking about slavery. We're talking about the advent of slavery. We're talking about when we went into Spain to bring Spain out of the Dark Ages, we was Moors. And why was this changed? It had to change. It had to change because one of the things that transpired, you won't take my birthright. I told you Kamala Harris at Carter's homegoing service, her husband spoke, the European guy. Kamala Harris, who's the vice president of the United States, husband, she said, was, what did she say her husband was? Because I know Ruth, the Moabite, I'm talking about it again. I'm talking about Sister Ruth. And Sister Ruth is a Moabite. But Sister Ruth was a Jewish girl. And when you talk about Asia, and when you talk about Europe, when you're talking about somebody being Asiatic, they are not European. You one or the other. So Kamala Harris' husband, where he from, Germany? Or is he from the same place that Biden is from? Because when you begin to talk about Asiatic and European, one of them is the higher self and the other is the lower self. Because when you look at those two formulations, and I say that they are the higher self and the lower self, the higher self is the mother of virtues and the harmonies of life that breeds justice, mercy, love, and right. Can the higher self pass away? No. Why can't it pass away? Because it is a law in man. Man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his forefathers unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. Now you done took my birthright. You done took my birthright just like you did Jesus. You calling Jesus European now. You got Jesus. You got all of that genealogy who now European. Why? Because you took my birthright. You took my birthright because through the advent of slavery, when I was who I was and who I am, you wanted to change that because you had to take my birthright so you could take it for yourself. And all through Africa, you hear brothers saying right now and sisters saying right now, even those that go to church, inside the church, you hear the preacher talking. And when you hear the preacher talking, it's talking about the Moabites, it's talking about the Israelites, it's talking about the Canaanites. But when you talk about these people, you're talking about the European nation. You're talking about the European nations of people. Because when we went into Spain and when we was more, we was not European. We was Asiatic. See, you got Asiatic Muslim and you have European. So Kamala Harris' husband, look at him. It's hard to say this and it's hard for us to accept it, But when you begin to look at Kamala Harris' husband, and he tell you who he's supposed to be, because whoever he's supposed to be is who I am. See? Because we're looking, and we're looking at the literature again, because we're talking about Abraham, and we're talking about Boaz by Ruth. See, Abraham was not always Abraham. He first was Abram, and then he became Abraham. And he became Abraham when he found grace in the eyes of God. So let's look at this again. Abraham, Boaz by Ruth. Now, he first was Abram, and then he became Abraham. He became Abraham when he found grace in the eyes of God. And this makes you look at your people. This make you look at what you've been through, because when you begin to talk, we just talked about Africa, and we was just talking about the 2nd century and how before Muhammad was even born, because I told you that he was born in 570 and he passed form in 632. But before he passed form, we fought with the Ottoman Turks. But what is going on now that people don't want to talk about, they say Muhammad is the last and the seal of the prophet. Now, Muhammad looked just like me. When you begin to check the history, you'll see Muhammad looked just like me. Now, his wife might have come from somewhere else. Muhammad looked just like me. He's of African descent. Because when we begin to talk about Africa and when we begin to talk about Europe, it was those of African descent that brought love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice to the world. We brought civilization to the world. We told the people to rise up out of the muck and be who you are, descendants of the ancient Moabites and Canaanites and Hittites. See, we have to look at this. We have to look at it again, because when you go back and talk about Abraham, you're talking about Boaz by Ruth. See, let's stop here for a minute, because this is something that we're taught all the time in Sunday school. In the Moorish Science Temple of America, we have a Sunday school every Sunday. And we have other classes too. And in these classes, our instructors teach us on these things that Noble Drew Ali left for us. Because we're looking again at Jesus. And I was thinking about some of my friends that I used to go to church with when I was a child. And I'm looking at them. And as I look at them, they was talking about Jesus. And they was talking about how Jesus is the only Savior of the world. And they said Jesus taught you and me about our forefather, because Jesus' mother was married. Jesus' mother was married. And that's where they wanted to stop it at. They didn't want to take it no further. But they said Jesus' mother was Mary. But Mary had a mother. And Mary's mother's name was Anna. Anna's husband's name was Joachim. And when you talk about Anna, and when you begin to talk about Joachim, then you know we're talking about that Jewish girl. See, because when you begin to talk about the Jews, we're not talking about no European. The Europeans look just like Kamala Harris' husband. We're not talking about no Jews. We're trying to hook you back up with the family of nations and show you who your forefathers were. Because in all the world, there are but two things, Asiatic and European. One of them is the higher self, and the other is the lower self. Now, the higher self is the mother of virtues and the harmonies of life. That breeds justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self is the carnal self. The body of desires is a reflection of higher self distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. So now let's just go back again. Let's look at the house of David. See? Now, when we talk about the house of David, we're talking about what are we talking about when we talking about the house of David? Because when you're talking about the house of David, you're talking about those of African descent, because Africa is the cradle of civilization. Everybody come through Africa. This is why us of Africa went into Spain, because they was over there acting crazy. They was doing everything that was diametrically opposed with what you're not supposed to do. Because Drew Ali, when he came, because he had to come. He had to come because we had lost our nationality. We had lost our divine creed. We had lost everything that Rome took from us. They took from us because they wanted to be their own. So now, my Jesus is no longer around. But you got the church. And I got family members and all of them, they still in the church. They in the church and they still studying Jesus. But you got a lot of brothers and you got a lot of sisters. When they see brothers and sisters studying out of the Bible, studying out all those European books that they done took and switched up, you done changed it around. You got Jesus looking one way and you got Mary looking another way. Now, we said Abraham, Boaz by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph by Mary. We're talking about Jesus there. But when you begin to talk about our forefathers, and you talking about your foremothers, and you going back to Abraham, because before we can get any deeper into the 2nd century, when we begin to tell you what we were studying, and before Prophet Muhammad become the prophet, we was already moving in science, because in Africa, we was already studying the gospel. Because Drew Ali say the gospel of the resurrection of the dead is not confined to Jew or Greek. Listen. He said a gospel of the resurrection of the dead is not confined to the Jew or the Greek. Now just look at this. Because when you talk about the Jew, and when you begin to talk about the Greek, you're talking about one bloodline. You're talking about one people. But that don't have anything to do with you and me. Because when they claim to be this and that, is only because through the advent of slavery, after these Europeans conquered us and put us into slavery, they took it because they wanted to have it. They didn't want us to have it no more, and we lost it all. We lost it all, and all of us right now is thinking like that. That's why we going back to what I was telling you about earlier when I seen this brother Sharif talking on the broadcast. And when he was talking on the broadcast, everybody is talking about the black man. Everybody is talking about being black. But the truth of the matter is, there's no such thing as a black man. There's no such thing as a Negro. There's no such thing as a color. And Drew Ali said he gonna make the Europeans enforce this law because the truth must be told. In all the world, there are but two things. One is Asiatic and the other is European. You are one or the other. So who are you? You Asiatic or are you a European? It's a difference. It's a difference because we're going back to Kamala Harris now. Look at her husband. Look at him. I remember when I was in the military and I went to Vietnam. But I have friends of mine at that time. They didn't go to Vietnam at that time. They went to Germany. They went to Germany because Germany played a great part because that's a European nation. You're Asiatic or you're European. When you begin to talk about Germany, you're talking about the European nations. And most of those that's in Germany claim to be Kamala Harris today. because truth don't change. And this is why Noble Drew Ali had to come. Allah had to send him to this earth to redeem us of our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth, because it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. So now we're talking about principles. We're talking about name, and we're talking about principles that delude to slavery. And we are all slaves. Because we are slaves to sin. It says that it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. Now let me share this. It's very important that I share this, because when we begin to look at ourselves, when we begin to study ourselves, you will see that there was a time when there was no such thing as Negro, colored, and black. I said this before, and the sister said this to her daughter today. I said this before, because there was a time when we were not Negro, colored, black, Afro-American, or whatever name you want to give to a people. But through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honor not the creed and principles of their mothers and fathers and strayed after the gods of Europe, of whom they knew nothing of. So this is where we come in at. This is where we come in at to listen to this era of time and what Noble Drew Ali brought to us. Now let's go back to this meeting that I seen on television with some brothers that's Moors, but they call themselves black. And they doing everything that they can, because when we went into Spain, who were we? Were we black then? Because you wasn't in existence then. See? Because you got to understand that when Noble Drew Ali found the Moorish Science Temple of America, all these different groups, all these different people who claim to be who they are not, they stepped aside of Drew Ali and took the money. They got paid. A lot of people got paid. That's why they look the way they look today, and we look the way that we look today, because of what has been given to them. And why was that? Because they wanted us to call ourselves black. And I know most of the brothers and sisters I know, they start calling themselves black. They call themselves Asiatic black man. See, but you're Asiatic or you're European. So ain't no such thing as an Asiatic black man, because black, according to science, means death. Black, according to science, means death. And the only black flag I know is the one that killed roaches. And this is where the ether began to change. Because when Noble Drew Ali founded the Moorish Science Temple of America in 1913 AD for the express and profound purpose of teaching you about your nationality and teaching you about your divine creed. Like I say, we gave the world civilization. We went into Spain and gave Europe civilization. And when we went into slavery, what the Europeans did in their group, they just took our forefathers. They took our name. They called them, they got married now. When all my friends went to church, and I got aunts, they got churches, her and her husband. One of the things that they never talked about was Murray's mother, Anna, and her husband, Jacqueline. See, because there was two pillars in talking about the Asiatic world. There was two pillars, Asiatic and European. The two pillars was Jacqueline and Boaz. Now, we know Boaz married Ruth. In that union, you got Obed, you got King David, you got Solomon, you got Hezekiah, you got Joseph by Mary way down the board. But these are ours. This is what Allah gave us. When we look at the Moors in the 2nd century, see, we talking about the 2nd century now. When you look at Moors, and the Moors are the one that honor Jesus. We honor Abraham, we honor Jesus. Because Jesus was of our bloodline genealogy. Everybody had a bloodline. But you know what? The whole world was called Asia one time. Even all those people that we call European today, there was a time when they was Asiatic. See? You can call yourself Asiatic Muslim if you want, because a Muslim is one who submits his will to Allah. And how do you submit your will to Allah? You submit your will to Allah by living according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And how do you live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice? Because you love your brothers and sisters. And you tell them the truth. That they live in freedom. Love, truth, peace, freedom. And what will come to us all? Justice. Justice will come to us all. Because justice is dealing upright, equal, and fair. It said, what is a Muslim? It said, a Muslim is one who submits his will to Allah. And how do you submit your will to Allah? We have 5 principles. You know, you got in Surah, you have 5 principles. We have 5 principles too. So this is a new era of time now. And in this era of time, Noble Ali had to rewrite some things because the Europeans took and ran with it. And Noble Ali had to come and to redeem us from some sins that we had lost that the Europeans gave to us. And again, just look at Kamala Harris' husband. Look at it. You'd accepted it. And you want to accept it because you're getting paid to accept it. And when you look at brothers and sisters who took this money from the European nations, I could understand it. And I'm looking at it every day, and I'm seeing that they're constantly working, because their job is to knock you and me down because they done took my forefathers. They done took my forefathers. They done buried my forefathers in Vatican Square. But look at your mothers. Look at your fathers. When they was teaching, because they was teaching the teachings of Jesus. See? They was teaching. They was talking about Mary, and they was talking about Joseph. And they say Mary was married to Joseph, and this one was married to David. Everybody. But we're talking about Asiatic. We're not even talking about the European now, because they had their own concept. We went into Spain, and we had to go into Spain. We had to go into Spain because Europe was in the Dark Ages. They was doing everything that was diametrically opposed to what God said. I remember when I first grew up, and I was in school, and we had all the elders. See, my biological father was born in 1899. And my cousin Ruth, who just passed last year at 100 years old, her father, Uncle O, was my uncle. And all these brothers was living. They was living in the 18th century. And in 1899, this is where I'm from, Washington, D.C. In 1899, they had the Dunbar High School on the news. And they were showing how the European nations took all of the teachings that we had learned in Dunbar. They changed the whole curriculum because they said that we was getting too much information. Meaning that if we getting too much information, it's stagnating them from doing what they supposed to do. What do I mean by that? They changed the curriculum because they said that we had too much wisdom. We had too much knowledge. And we was getting too much understanding. So they changed the whole curriculum. And that was something because I taught on it not too long ago about a friend of mine who was born in Washington, D.C., and a friend of mine that wasn't born in Washington, D.C. And the one that was born in Washington, D.C., he went to school, and they didn't set him back. He graduated and passed. But the other brother, the one that they set back, he came from South Carolina. And when he came from South Carolina, he went to school in Washington, D.C. They set him back 3 grades. They set him back 3 grades because they say those that was in Washington, D.C. already and grew up there had the signs that these new people didn't. So if you from South Carolina, North Carolina, and you come to Washington, D.C., they're going to set you back a few grades because they're saying the nation's capital, that those that was born and raised there, they had a knowledge and a wisdom that the others didn't have. So we're going through changes. We're going through changes, and it's a deep lesson that we need to look at. We all need to look at this because man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. But there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So now we're looking at this. We're looking at who we were because Africa is the cradle of civilization. And all those people that called themselves European was once you called was white. We never called them white because white means purity. Purity means God. And God means the ruler of the land. So when we begin to talk about Asiatic and we begin to talk about European, we'll see that those of European origin today are they who took the Moorish birthright. We went into Spain, but we went in Spain in 711. The Moors went into Spain in 711 to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. See, because the reason why they had to do that, because we was getting too much play. We was teaching some lessons that the Europeans didn't even know. That's why I say it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. That's why I was saying earlier when I grew up and when I went to school, all of the old people, the elders, my uncle, all of them used to tell all the brothers and sisters, one thing that you don't do no licking and you don't do no sucking. That's not Asiatic. That come out of Europe. That's why we went into Europe to bring them out of the Dark Ages because they was not living a moral and clean life. And the whole world was called Asia at one time. So now you look at it today. You look at it today. Brothers and sisters are doing, when I come up, we had a little more moral principles. There was no licking. There was no sucking. It was none of that. That didn't come about until the European nations brought it about. This is why we went into Europe to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages, because these are the things that they was doing in Europe. They was licking, they was sucking, doing everything that's diametrically opposed to the teachings of the Asiatic nation. God, no. God is the ruler. And we, as brothers and sisters, I remember when I first joined the Moorish Science Temple of America. And before I could become a Grand Sheik, the Sheik taught me. He said, certain things you don't do. Certain things you don't do in the European nation. Let them do what they do. This is why we went there in Spain, to bring Europe out of that and tell them to renew their acts and to mend their ways. See, and this is what we have to re-teach our brothers and our sisters, because when you look at them, they look just like a European. They look just like them. They're doing the same thing the European nations are doing, you know. And I got to teach my babies because my daughters already know. They've been taught that already. Both of their husbands are from Africa. So that's a blessing that I do have. But by many ages, man gonna tarry until all his lessons are learned. You know, I just had some friends. In the last month, I had about 5 or 6 friends done passed. They done passed phone. They're no longer living on earth. And I hear brothers and sisters, they say, well, she is no longer living, and he is no longer living. They with God now. That's not so, because we got to look at this again, because the book tells us many ages man gonna tarry until all his lessons have been learned. So in order for you and me to become one with God, certain things we got to let go. Certain things that we've been doing, certain things that we are doing, that we've been doing, we got to let it go. Because if you're talking about you want to become one with your Father God, Allah, the first thing you have to do is give up those things that's diametrically opposed to the Asiatic thought pattern. Because you got 2 thought patterns. You have an Asiatic thought pattern and you have a European thought pattern. And we of African descent, we got to become conscious of this Asiatic and this European thought pattern, because this is the only way that we're going to get close to God. We keep talking about we trying to get close to God, but you got foes that you have to overcome. Just like when I was in brothers that was in the junk. See them brothers inside them junks messing with Europeans, hitting them boys and all that kind of stuff. You got to get that up too. Because right now you's a gun. If you find a brother that is or was messing with them gumps, you got to get that up. You got to fight that. You got to let that wrath go. You got to say, Allah, forgive me for living a moral and clean life, or forgive me for living an unclean life. See, these are things that we have to look at, because we're talking about Asiatic. Now, when we begin to talk about Jesus, when we begin to talk about all God's prophets, they was Asiatic, they were not European. This is something that they stole because they don't like it. Like they didn't claim Jesus now. They done took my Jesus. Look at it. Because we're talking about Jacqueline and Boaz, which was the 2 pillars. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to finish this another time. But I'm always honored to be able to come before my Portland listening audience and talk to you about the last prophet in these days and time, Prophet Noble Ali. At this time, I recite the Moorish American prayer. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Wade in the water, wade in the water, Muslim, wade in the water. Drew Ali, trouble the water.